The rise of AI in legal workflows, context and importance. Start with the lived reality of a legal team on a Tuesday afternoon. Email threads stack up. A procurement deal waits on a vendor paper that looks familiar, yet not quite aligned. Sales is asking if legal can turn a red line by tomorrow morning. An underwriter needs a non-standard endorsement checked before a renewal goes out. None of this is unusual. The surprising part is how much of this work is predictable, repetitive, and rule-bound. Over time, entire careers are spent making the same changes to the same families of contracts. That repetition is the exact terrain where artificial intelligence creates asymmetric advantage. The critical point is not that AI can think for you. The critical point is that AI can enforce your standards, at speed, inside the tools you already use, every single time. The modern contract stack was forged around word processing and tracked changes. That is where lawyers live. So the first lesson of this masterclass is simple. Real adoption happens when the machine walks into your office quietly and sits down inside Word. You open a document. A sidebar is already there. You select a playbook. You press review. In seconds, you have a list of checks your team cares about, organized, explained, and linked directly to the place where the text must change. This is not magic. It is a disciplined application of pattern recognition to a domain that has clear patterns. The symmetry to notice is that contracts are long, but their risks are concentrated. The asymmetry to exploit is that human attention is scarce, while machine attention is cheap. Think like an operator. Where do deal cycles stall? They stall in handoffs. They stall in the late discovery that a governing law is out of bounds, or a liability cap is missing, or a data security clause is vague. They stall when a junior reviewer misses a subtle carve-out that was never acceptable for your company. They stall because every reviewer is a different person, with a different memory and a different tolerance for fatigue. The product reverses that dynamic by making the first pass not only fast, but consistent. It does not guess at your policy. It applies the policy you gave it. It does not invent style. It uses the style you wrote into your guidance. In practice, that means a junior attorney can operate at the level of a senior reviewer on day one, not because the junior has become a senior overnight, but because the system has bottled the senior's institutional knowledge into rules that fire every time. Consider the scope. This is not a research assistant for litigation. It does not chase case citations or write briefs. The target is high-volume commercial work where the same issues recur across vendor agreements, sales agreements, non-disclosure agreements, statements of work, and the standard addenda that follow those documents around your enterprise. The more volume you run, the more time you save, and the more valuable the consistency becomes. That is why legal operations care. That is why business stakeholders care. The financial case is straightforward. Faster turnaround shortens the time to revenue. Fewer misses reduce downstream disputes. Cleaner drafts reduce back and forth cycles with counterparties. And when a pattern keeps derailing negotiations, the tool makes it visible because it keeps the receipts. You can see which issues fail most often, which suggestions are always accepted, and which battles you do not need to keep fighting. Focus now on the playbook. In plain terms, a playbook is a set of checks. Each check represents a rule you actually enforce in your practice. The check has a name you will recognize, a condition that describes what you want, guidance that explains the why, a suggested change that implements your preferred position, and a comment that speaks to a counterparty in human terms. The machine reads the contract semantically. It finds the relevant clause even when the labels and headings are different. It matches what it found to what you want. Where there is a gap, it flags it. Where the text can be repaired, it proposes the fix in tracked changes. Where a note to the other side helps, it inserts one. That is the loop. It is not glamorous, it is reliable. The better you encode your doctrine, the better the machine enforces your doctrine. Understand the on-ramp. Enterprise realities matter. Your best results come when your playbooks reflect your actual risk tolerances for specific contract families. That takes thoughtful setup. For a training cohort or a continuing education module, you can begin with benchmark playbooks on a standard master services agreement to let learners see and feel the workflow without touching sensitive data. You can show them how a list of 80 or so checks behaves on a clean template. You can show what happens when you press apply all, how comments populate, how the navigation jumps precisely to each suggested edit, and how a short natural language prompt can produce a summary email of the 5 most material changes. You can also be honest about the effort it takes to stand up a true production environment across multiple companies. Each organization needs its own instance, its own playbooks, its own permissioning and whitelisting. That cost is not a bug. It is the reason the results are trustworthy. Keep an eye on the human factors. Adoption fails when tools ask lawyers to abandon the muscle memory of how they already work. Adoption succeeds when the tool sits inside the pain they already use, speaks their language, and accelerates the motions they already perform. Run a contract, sort for failed checks, read the rationale, apply the tracked change, insert the comment, ask for a short summary to the counterparty, copy and paste. That rhythm is familiar. What changes is the pace. What changes is the confidence that nothing on your checklist fell on the floor. The machine never gets tired. It never decides that a carve-out looks close enough at midnight. It applies what you wrote, the way you wrote it, at the moment you need it, without the ego or the exhaustion. There is a deeper shift to confront. When a legal department encodes its best practices into playbooks and runs every contract through them, the organization stops relying on oral tradition. Mentorship remains essential, but the floor rises for everyone. You will still need judgment to make trade-offs across the document. You will still need to negotiate where business realities require exceptions. You will still need to recognize when a clause is acceptable because it interacts favorably with another clause 2 pages later. The product does not relieve you of those responsibilities. It removes the noise that used to keep you from hearing the signal. And because the noise is removed consistently, you can compare deals across time with more integrity. You can see how far a given draft diverged from your baseline on each issue. You can measure which teams are closing faster and why. Bring the insurance and regulated industry lens into focus. Legal leaders in these environments are asked to do more with flat headcount. At the same time, they must document that their processes are controlled, repeatable, and auditable. An AI-assisted first pass becomes part of that control surface. You define the rules once. You run them every time. You retain the redlined outputs and the comment trails. You create evidence that your team checked the clauses that regulators or auditors care about. You can even partition playbooks so that a procurement manager can self-serve on low-risk agreements within strict boundaries, escalating any failed check above a certain severity to legal. This is where the operational leverage emerges. What used to be a queue for attorneys becomes triage. Attorneys spend their time where the facts and the business stakes actually require it. Acknowledge constraints. Do not pretend the tool is something it is not. It will not choose your risk posture for you. It will not make bespoke language for a deal without your direction. It can sometimes propose a fix that is nearly right and needs a light human edit. It may miss a highly unusual drafting pattern that sits outside the envelope of normal phrasing. This is why you remain in the loop. You accept, you modify, or you ignore, and the work product remains yours. The path to mastery is not to abdicate judgment, but to orchestrate it. You let the machine do the part that machines do well, and you reserve your limited attention for the parts that make you a lawyer. Think through negotiation dynamics. When the other side sends unconventional language, you can see the outliers immediately. You can show a business partner the delta from your standard without theatrics. You can anchor your counter in your documented policy rather than in personal preference. That reduces friction internally and externally. You become the person who moves a deal forward with a clear explanation rather than the person who slows it, because you need a day to hunt for subtle issues by eye. Over a portfolio of contracts, that reputational shift compounds. Sales trusts you. Vendors learn that you are consistent. Counterparties understand where they will need to concede and where you will not care. The product earns that consistency by enforcing it. Use the generative side tactically. There are moments after you apply edits when you need to communicate the story of the changes. The built-in composer can take the contract, the comments, the red lines, and your simple instruction, then draft an outbound summary that hits the right tone. You do not let the machine speak for you unsupervised. You let it draft a starting point and you tune it. The gain is not only speed, but cognitive relief. Instead of staring at a blank email cursor at the end of a long day, you start from a tight outline and refine it in your voice. Over time, you will notice a larger effect. Because the first pass is faster, you spend more of the day thinking and less of the day hunting for the same 3 problems across 20 documents. Design education accordingly. If you are training attorneys, paralegals, and contract managers, build muscle memory around a few core moves. Select the right playbook for the right contract family. Run the review immediately, rather than after you mark up half the draft by hand. Sort by severity. Apply suggestions where they are clearly aligned. Modify when the business context requires nuance. Use the composer for summaries and for drafting a missing clause from your own guidance. Save the record. Move on. Teach this cadence in live demos with clean sample agreements. Then add stress by introducing small landmines. A liability cap that is too high. A governing law that is out of range. an indemnity that looks mutual but hides a carve-out that matters to you. Let learners watch the system catch the landmines and let them decide what to accept or reject. The goal is not to turn them into passive acceptors of machine output. The goal is to turn them into operators who can make the machine productive. Treat setup as a leadership exercise. Someone has to own the playbooks. Someone has to decide what is a must-have, what is a should-have, and what is a nice-to-have. Someone has to make the call that a clause the team has argued about for years will be standardized one way for this quarter, measured and revisited if the market pushes back. The product gives you the enforcement engine. You still have to supply doctrine. The work is worth it. Once encoded, your standards become portable across time and across personnel. New hires ramp faster because the rules live where they work. Outside counsel can be held to the same standards without endless memo traffic. Internal teams can self-serve on routine matters with a safety net, and you can prove to the business that legal has moved from artisanal craft to disciplined system without losing the parts of the craft that matter. Look ahead without hype. The immediate win is the first pass. The medium-term win is using the data from hundreds of reviews to refine your positions. If 8 out of 10 counterparties refuse a provision the same way, you can adjust your default so you stop fighting a losing war and start asking for the win that actually matters downstream. If a class of issues almost never triggers negotiation in your vertical, you can relax an internal check that creates noise for your team and friction for your partners. These are small changes that produce large effects because they compound over every agreement you touch. The product makes those changes obvious. The culture you build determines whether you act on them. Anchor the business case in outcomes, not features. Faster is good because faster closes revenue. Consistent is good because consistent reduces risk. Transparent is good because transparent helps you manage internal expectations and external partnerships. Focus on those outcomes when you roll this into a department or a course. Show the before and after. An NDAQ that used to take a week turns in a day. A vendor template that used to come back with 5 rounds returns with 2. A sales contract that used to require a senior reviewer for every pass can now be triaged by a trained associate with escalation only on failed checks above a defined threshold. Features exist to create those results. The product exists to let a legal team act like a system. Carry a simple mental model with you. Standardize what you can. Automate what you standardize. Escalate what you cannot automate. Measure everything. Feed those measurements back into your standards. Repeat. The product sits in the middle of that loop. It gives you the leverage to run it without burning your people out. It gives you the language to explain your decisions to the business. It gives you the structure to train the next cohort of practitioners so they become productive quickly and safely. Close this opening with clarity about what the rest of the masterclass will do. We will not talk about AI in the abstract. We will talk about workflow. We will talk about doctrine. We will talk about setup. We will talk about what to do when the machine gets close but not perfect. We will talk about how to measure value in weeks, not quarters. We will talk about how to integrate this into departments that do not like change. We will talk about how to make a cohort of professionals fully literate in a tool that sits at the center of their daily work. The point of a tool is not novelty. The point of a tool is leverage. You are here to learn how to pull that lever with confidence.
The nights at 3370 Habersham Road grow longer with each passing day. The mansion, still beautiful from the street, now feels alive on the inside. Doors that once stood still begin to groan in the dark. Light bends strangely across the walls, and silence carries a weight that presses on the lungs. Andrea walks its halls by lamplight, her footsteps echoing. Yet she knows she is not walking alone. The house answers with faint creaks, with whispers too soft to form words. Evan sits at his desk, pages blank, pen unmoving. He tells himself he is writing, but he is only listening. Listening for the sound of her. Annabelle, 19 forever, drifting through corridors, searching for something she cannot name. Beyond the gates of Buckhead, Johnny's hideaway keeps singing its old songs. Couples spin under the glow of neon, unaware that grief clings to the city like humidity. They laugh, they dance, and yet the same sorrow flows back with them when they step into the night. Some try to forget. Others try to rebirth themselves in signs of dragons and phoenixes. But forgetting never lasts. Rebirth is never complete. The trains keep rolling. Norfolk Southern thunders past the city at midnight, steel shrieking into the dark. And always, always, Evan hears the echo in those wheels. Back and forth, back and forth. The same rhythm Annabelle walks in the rooms above him.
Introduction to Pincites AI Contract Review Tool Overview. Now we turn our focus to Pincites, the AI-driven contract review platform at the heart of this course. In many ways, this is the pivot point of the entire series. Up to this point, we have been diagnosing the problem, describing the structural inefficiencies in traditional contract review, and the burdens placed on human reviewers who must process hundreds of documents without error or fatigue. Lecture 2 laid out the time cost, the inconsistency, the fragile knowledge transfer, the expensive scaling problem, and the burnout created by endless repetition. Lecture 3 begins the solution. It is here that we step into what Pincites actually is, what it was designed to solve, who it is for, and why it represents a structural change in legal workflows. To master this system is to master a new way of thinking about legal work itself. Pincites is not simply another AI tool. It is a software as a service product built from the ground up for contract review. It does not live as a separate standalone environment, demanding that lawyers learn a new interface or migrate their documents into a foreign system. Instead, it takes root inside Microsoft Word, the place where legal work has always happened. This is important because adoption in law is always constrained by inertia. Lawyers live in Word. They draft, they redline, they comment, they negotiate in Word. Asking them to step outside of Word is like asking a surgeon to leave the operating theater and practice in a simulation room every time they pick up a scalpel. It does not stick. Pincites understood this. Its genius is not in inventing a new universe, but in colonizing the one that already exists. When you install the add-in, a sidebar appears inside Word. You log in, you load a playbook, and the system comes alive. What was once static text becomes dynamic terrain, scanned by AI and compared against your standards, issue by issue, clause by clause, deviation by deviation. Pincites was founded in 2023 by a group of attorneys and technologists who saw exactly where the fault lines were forming in the profession. They recognized that while there were AI models capable of answering broad legal questions, drafting memos, or performing case research, none of those capabilities touched the most repetitive and costly layer of commercial law: contract review at scale. The mission was clear: speed up negotiation, enforce institutional standards, and remove the bottleneck that had plagued corporate legal departments and law firms for decades. By positioning itself at Y Combinator, the founders signaled that this was not just a boutique tool for a handful of lawyers. It was a platform designed to scale across enterprises. It was meant to be the backbone of high-volume contract workflows, the piece that would allow lean legal departments to handle workloads previously requiring dozens more attorneys, and to do so with greater consistency and less risk. The first thing to understand is what Pincites is not. It is not a litigation research engine. It is not a generalist chatbot that will write your arguments for court. It is not a replacement for Westlaw or Lexis. It is not designed to draft a 40-page memo on constitutional law. That is not its lane. Its lane is narrow but deep, the commercial contract side of the legal house, the world of NDAs, vendor service agreements, sales contracts, master services agreements, purchase orders, employment offers, policy endorsements, the documents that move business forward but clog the arteries of legal departments. The volume is massive, the stakes are real, the patterns are repetitive, and the inefficiencies are glaring. This is where Pincites shines, because it automates the first pass of review, the point at which most time is wasted and most inconsistencies arise. The founders made a deliberate choice not to chase esoteric legal analysis, but to double down on the routine. That is what makes it powerful. That is what makes it different. So what does it actually do? Picture opening a vendor contract in Word. You activate Pincites in the sidebar. You select the playbook for vendor agreements. The AI runs through the document, scanning each clause semantically. Not keyword matching, not template spotting, but actually understanding what the clause is doing. It checks that against your rules. If the liability cap is missing, it flags it. If the indemnification is one-sided, it flags it. If the governing law is out of bounds, it flags it. Each issue appears as a checklist item. Green checks for clauses that pass, red warnings for clauses that fail. Click on the failed check, and you see why it failed, what your standard requires, what the suggested red line is, and even a pre-written comment you can drop into the document to explain the change. One button press, and the red line appears in the text. One button press, and the comment attaches. What once took minutes of manual editing now takes seconds. This is not simply about speed, though speed is dramatic. Some users report negotiations happening 10 times faster with AI assistance than before. The deeper value is consistency. Every reviewer, from the most junior to the most senior, now applies the same standards in the same way. The institutional knowledge of the firm or the department is no longer trapped in the heads of a handful of senior lawyers. It is encoded into playbooks and enforced by the machine every time. That means no more risk of one office approving a clause that another office rejects. No more danger that a tired reviewer at midnight accepts a liability cap that should never have passed. No more slow erosion of standards through inconsistency. Pincites acts as the memory of the institution, the ever-vigilant guardian of policy. Now reflect on what that means in practice. For an in-house team, it means the NDA backlog that once consumed days can now be cleared in hours. It means sales contracts no longer stall in legal review, because the AI has already surfaced and corrected the standard issues before the lawyer even reads the draft. It means procurement teams can run their agreements through the system and escalate only the high-risk deviations, freeing lawyers to focus on negotiation strategy rather than policing boilerplate. For law firms, it means associates produce cleaner drafts, partners spend less time correcting mistakes, and the firm can take on more fixed-fee work profitably. For insurance companies, it means endorsements and reinsurance agreements are checked consistently against regulatory requirements, reducing the risk of costly compliance errors. The gains are not abstract. They are measurable in hours saved, dollars preserved, risks reduced, and opportunities accelerated. One of the asymmetries to note here is the way Pincites collapses hierarchy. Traditionally, the flow of work in a legal team is hierarchical. Junior associates or new hires do the first pass. Seniors review and correct. Partners or general counsel make the final call. Knowledge flows down through mentorship and osmosis. But Pincites changes that. A junior with the tool can now produce a review that reflects the standards of the senior. A new hire on day one can apply the same checks as a 10-year veteran because the rules are written into the playbook. That does not mean the junior has the same judgment as the senior. It means the junior is operating with the same enforcement of standards as the senior. That raises the floor across the entire team. It democratizes competence. It turns what used to be a fragile oral tradition into an enforceable written code. In effect, Pincites institutionalizes wisdom, and once institutionalized, it scales indefinitely. Another asymmetry lies in adoption. Many AI tools fail because they demand behavioral change. They require lawyers to leave Word, upload documents to a web app, navigate a new interface, and learn new workflows. Adoption falters, usage drops, and the tool dies. Pincites sidesteps that entirely. It lives in Word. The interface is simple. The outputs are familiar. Tracked changes and comments. The same format lawyers have used for decades. The result is that adoption is smooth. Lawyers do not feel like they are being asked to become data scientists. They feel like they have been given a smarter assistant inside the environment they already trust. This is not an accident, it is design. And it is why Pincites has traction where other tools stumble. We should also discuss what Pincites does not do, because clarity about scope is essential. It does not research case law. It does not draft appellate briefs. It does not tell you whether a clause is enforceable under the laws of a foreign jurisdiction. It does not replace negotiation strategy. It does not decide which risks you should accept for business reasons. Those decisions remain yours. What it does is ensure that every contract you see has been scrubbed against your standards, that every deviation has been surfaced, that every suggested fix is ready to apply. It does the first pass flawlessly so that you can spend your energy on the parts of the contract that truly require judgment and strategy. In doing so, it does not diminish the lawyer. It amplifies the lawyer. It removes the noise so the signal can be heard. Consider a practical scenario. You receive a third-party NDA drafted by a potential partner. Normally, you would skim through, check the confidentiality period, ensure the carve-outs are correct, make sure there is mutuality, confirm governing law, and fix any overreach. With Pincites, you load the NDA, run the playbook, and within seconds see 3 failed checks. Confidentiality term is indefinite, governing law is outside your approved states, and indemnification is one-sided. The system shows you the exact text, the reason it fails, the suggested redline, and the comment. You click apply, and the NDA is fixed. You click apply again, and the governing law clause is corrected. You click apply again, and the indemnification is balanced. What might have taken half an hour is done in 2 minutes. You still review the document. You still make judgment calls. But the mechanical work is handled. The margin for error is gone. The consistency is enforced. The time saved is enormous. Now scale that across hundreds of NDAs. Scale it across vendor contracts, employment offers, sales agreements. The savings compound, the consistency compounds, the risk reduction compounds. Over time, the legal department that uses Pincites looks very different from the one that does not. It is faster, it is leaner, it is more reliable, it is more trusted by the business, and it has more bandwidth to focus on the strategic initiatives that truly require human insight. This is the transformation we are describing, not a gimmick, not a shiny object, but a structural change in how legal departments function. It is also important to understand that Pincites is not static. The playbooks evolve, the AI learns. Every time you apply a suggestion or modify it, the system takes note. Over time, it adapts to your style. It begins to suggest language that mirrors the phrasing your team prefers. It becomes more accurate in detecting what you consider acceptable. It refines its outputs to align with your evolving standards. This is continuous improvement, and it means that the more you use it, the better it gets. The longer it runs, the more it reflects the true voice of your legal team. It becomes not just a tool you use, but a tool that knows you. That is the trajectory. That is why early adoption pays off, because the compounding learning effect makes the tool more valuable over time. Strategically, Pincites shifts the identity of the legal department. Instead of being seen as the bottleneck, legal becomes the enabler. Instead of being reactive, legal becomes proactive. Instead of being the place where deals slow down, legal becomes the place where deals accelerate. This is not just about optics, it is about influence. When legal is trusted to move fast and enforce standards consistently, it gains credibility with the business. It gains leverage in negotiations. It gains a seat at the table where strategic decisions are made. In a world where legal departments are under constant pressure to do more with less, this shift in perception is as valuable as the efficiency gains themselves. So to summarize, Pincites is an AI-powered contract review and negotiation tool embedded directly into Microsoft Word, purpose-built for high-volume workflows, designed to automate first-pass review by enforcing playbooks, and structured to solve the exact inefficiencies outlined in Lecture 2. It accelerates review times dramatically, enforces consistency across reviewers, embeds institutional knowledge into code, reduces the cost of scale, prevents burnout, and turns legal from a bottleneck into a lever for business speed. It is not a generalist, it is a specialist, and that specialization is what makes it powerful. It is like having a junior associate who never tires, never forgets, never misses a clause, sitting beside you in Word for every contract you touch. Lecture 3, then, is the introduction, the doorway into the world of Pincites. We have framed its identity, its purpose, its scope, and its value. We have shown how it fits into the pain points described previously. From here, the journey goes deeper. In the next lecture, we will dissect the specific features, the automation of clause checking, the generation of red lines and comments, the multilingual support, the real-time drafting assistance, the summarization capabilities, the comparisons against templates. We will look under the hood at how it works. But first, hold on to the big picture. Pincites is not here to change what lawyers do. It is here to change how they do it. It is not here to erase judgment. It is here to liberate judgment from the grind of repetition. That is its promise. That is its purpose. That is its power. Large language models at the core and playbooks as the knowledge base. When we talk about Pincites, it is tempting to focus entirely on what the tool does on the surface. Red lines appearing magically in Word, failed checks marked with neat red flags, comments that feel like they were written by a seasoned partner. But to really master Pincites, you have to appreciate what is happening invisibly underneath. Because this is where trust is built. Lawyers do not give trust lightly. We demand to know not just that something works, but why it works, and what is actually happening behind the curtain. So let us begin by peeling back that curtain and examining the two pillars of the system: large language models at the core, and playbooks as the knowledge base. Large language models, or LLMs, are the engines powering Pincites' ability to read, understand, and act on contracts. If you have ever experimented with GPT-4 or heard about models trained on terabytes of text, you have brushed up against the same category of technology. These models are not databases. They are not simply retrieving memorized phrases. They are statistical engines trained to predict language, and through that prediction, to grasp meaning. When Pincites ingests a contract, it is running the text through one of these models. What the model sees is not merely words like termination or confidentiality, but patterns of syntax and semantics that map onto its learned understanding of contract law. This is why Pincites can recognize that either party may end this agreement with 30 days written notice is functionally the same as the contract may be terminated by either party upon 30 days prior notice. It is not just keyword spotting, it is semantic comprehension. Now, of course, no LLM is literally a lawyer, but what makes Pincites different from a raw GPT chat window is the orchestration. The system does not unleash the model aimlessly, it anchors it to rules. And this is where playbooks enter. A playbook is not a casual metaphor. It is the codification of your institution's legal DNA. Every firm, every company, every general counsel's office has its instincts. We prefer New York law, not Delaware. We always cap liability at 12 months of fees. We never accept unilateral indemnities. Usually, this knowledge exists in memos or in the heads of senior counsel, or in an onboarding binder that no associate has fully read. Pincites takes that scattered body of knowledge and makes it executable. The playbook becomes a list of checks, each expressed as a condition the contract must meet. Think of it like this. The LLM is the reader. It reads the contract with uncanny fluency. The playbook is the judge. It says, given what you just read, does this clause comply with our standard? The model interprets, the playbook evaluates, and then the system synthesizes that into a report. Pass, fail, or needs attention. That triad, read, judge, report, is what gives you the sense that a junior lawyer has just combed through the agreement for you. Except this junior never gets tired, never skim reads, and never forgets a rule. But let's go deeper. Playbooks are not just static lists. Each item in a playbook carries multiple layers: the issue name, the condition to be satisfied, the resolution guidance, and often a suggested clause or comment. For example, take confidentiality. The playbook might say, confidentiality period must last at least 3 years from disclosure. That is the condition. Then it might provide resolution guidance. If shorter, extend to 3 years or escalate for approval. It can even include a pre-written clause. The confidentiality obligations shall continue for 3 years following the date of disclosure. And finally, a ready-to-use comment, adjusted term to align with our standard 3-year period. All of this is embedded. So when the LLM sees a confidentiality clause, it checks. Does the duration meet the rule? If not, it pulls the suggested fix and attaches the comment. What you see in Word is the final stage of a very structured pipeline. The beauty here is scalability. A single playbook might contain 50 or more checks. You could have one for NDAs, one for vendor agreements, one for MSAs, one for employment contracts. Each check represents a clause you care about. And because the LLM can semantically tag clauses, even when they are written differently, you do not need to hardcode every variant. You do not need to list confidential information, proprietary data, trade secrets, and all synonyms. The model understands they are all confidentiality provisions. That saves immense setup time. Traditional contract AI systems required you to train the model with dozens of examples. Pincites sidesteps that by leveraging pre-trained large language model comprehension. This is why many teams report they can get a playbook up and running within days rather than months. There is also an asymmetry at play here that most lawyers do not initially notice. In the old world, institutional knowledge was fragile. Partners retired, associates left, and with them went subtle preferences. The exact indemnity fallback they always negotiated, the governing law they would reluctantly accept as a compromise. With Pincites, once that preference is encoded in a playbook, it becomes permanent. It is no longer dependent on oral tradition, it is embedded in the tool. That means junior lawyers enforce standards as if they had 20 years of partner experience behind them. That means a new office in Singapore applies the same checks as the headquarters in New York. That means you can scale legal judgment across borders instantly. It is not just about efficiency, it is about institutional immortality. Of course, this raises the question, can the model misinterpret? Can a playbook be miswritten? Absolutely. Garbage in, garbage out still applies. If your rule is wrong, the AI will enforce the wrong rule. If your condition is too rigid, you will get false positives. If it is too vague, you will get misses. But the system is designed to adapt. Every time you accept or reject a suggestion, Pincites notes the outcome. Over time, it begins to adjust. If you consistently change 30 days to 45 in termination clauses, it will learn to anticipate that preference. This is not learning in the wild, uncontrolled sense. It is constrained adaptation, tethered to your playbook boundaries. but it is enough to give the sense that the system gets smarter the more you use it. That, too, mirrors the training of a junior associate. At first, they follow the checklist mechanically. Over time, they intuit your style. Pincites simulates that trajectory at scale. This, then, is the architecture we must grasp: an LLM at the core, semantically interpreting text, a playbook providing rules, preferences, and examples, a feedback loop refining suggestions, and an interface in Word that presents the result as if a human had just redlined the draft. The magic is not that AI is intelligent, the magic is orchestration, the choreography of human standards with machine fluency. Once you internalize this, you stop seeing Pincites as a black box. You see it as a partner with well-defined roles. The machine reads, the playbook judges, you decide. That triangulation is the essence of responsible AI in law. The real sophistication of Pincites lies in the way it reads. We already established that large language models provide fluency and that playbooks provide rules. But what bridges those two is the act of tagging, recognizing where a clause begins and ends, recognizing what category it belongs to, and understanding not just the words, but the function. Lawyers think in clauses, not in raw text. A governing law clause is a unit. An indemnity is a unit. A limitation of liability is a unit. Contracts are long, but their risks cluster in these functional units. For Pincites to work, it must be able to see the same units lawyers see. This is what semantic clause tagging accomplishes. Traditional tools often relied on keyword spotting. They would look for the word indemnify to find an indemnity, or confidential to find a confidentiality clause. But lawyers know language is never so consistent. Some drafts bury indemnification obligations in warranties. Some hide governing law in dispute resolution provisions. Some speak of disclosure without ever saying confidential. Keyword spotting fails. Semantic tagging succeeds because it uses the learned structure of language to infer function. The model knows that each party will protect and hold harmless the other against claims is indemnification, even if the word indemnify never appears. It knows that this agreement shall be governed and construed in accordance with the laws of New York is governing law, even if the heading says nothing of the sort. It tags the clause as what it is, not what it says on the surface. This tagging is not just about recognition, it is also about segmentation. Contracts are messy. They run long paragraphs together. They mix unrelated concepts in a single section. For human reviewers, this is tedious but manageable. We learn to parse. For a machine, it is more complex. Semantic tagging means breaking the document into coherent chunks that can be evaluated against rules. If the confidentiality clause is 3 paragraphs long, the model needs to tag that entire passage as confidentiality, so the playbook can apply the relevant rules. This segmentation allows the system to scale across varied drafting styles, ensuring that no matter how messy the contract is, the right clauses are tested against the right standards. But recognition alone is not enough. Contracts evolve, language shifts, market standards drift. A clause that was rare 5 years ago may now be common. A term of art may acquire new phrasing in a particular industry. This is where continuous learning enters. Every time you use Pincites, every time you accept or reject a suggestion, you are providing feedback. The system records that signal. Over time, it builds a profile of your preferences. If you consistently accept a 45-day termination period instead of the default 30, it learns that your institution tolerates 45. If you always rewrite gross negligence carve-outs in indemnities, it learns to preemptively flag them more aggressively. This is not uncontrolled drift. It is bounded by your playbook. But within those boundaries, the system adapts. It becomes sharper, more tailored, more aligned to your actual practice. Think of it like training a junior associate. At first, they follow the checklist rigidly, but as you correct them, they start to anticipate your preferences. They know when you will let something slide and when you will not. They internalize your style. Pincites simulates this apprenticeship at scale. The more you use it, the more it feels like it understands you. The asymmetry is staggering. One human associate might take years to train. Pincites absorbs patterns across hundreds of contracts in weeks. That acceleration compounds. Over time, it builds a living memory of your organization's risk posture, more accurate than any manual training program. Now let us go deeper. Contextual understanding across clauses. Lawyers never evaluate clauses in isolation. An indemnity interacts with a limitation of liability. A governing law clause interacts with a venue provision. A confidentiality clause interacts with an intellectual property clause. Context matters. A liability cap of $1 million may be fine in a small vendor agreement, but disastrous in a high-value SaaS contract. A mutual indemnity may be acceptable if paired with a strong insurance obligation, but unacceptable without it. Humans make these connections instinctively. Can AI? Pincites is designed to. By leveraging the breadth of its training data and the semantic tagging process, the system can evaluate not only single clauses but their interplay. For example, it can surface a warning. Liability cap is set at $100,000, but indemnity is unlimited. Consider whether this creates imbalance. Or, confidentiality clause lacks explicit exceptions, which may conflict with disclosure obligations under governing law. These are not merely rule failures, they are contextual mismatches. This ability to spot interplay makes the system feel more like a seasoned attorney, the kind who does not just tick boxes, but sees the bigger picture. Contextual understanding also allows for nuanced application of playbooks. A rule might say, termination for convenience must not exceed 30 days' notice, but in some contexts, a 60-day period may be acceptable if paired with favorable pricing or exclusivity concessions. Pincites can surface the issue and provide the explanation, but it leaves the final call to you. This preserves human judgment while still ensuring that nothing slips through unexamined. The machine does not decide strategy. It ensures you see the factors that matter so you can decide strategy with clarity. The combination of semantic tagging, continuous learning, and contextual analysis is what separates Pincites from the parade of failed legal tech tools that came before. It is not brittle. It does not collapse when language deviates. It does not stagnate as standards evolve. It does not treat clauses as isolated silos. It reads fluidly, it adapts incrementally, and it connects the dots. That trifecta is what gives lawyers confidence. It feels less like a toy and more like a colleague, one who may not have judgment but who never tires, never forgets, and never fails to notice. For all its sophistication, Pincites would never have taken root if it had required lawyers to abandon their home ground. Legal work is entrenched in Microsoft Word. Drafting, reviewing, commenting, redlining. These things happen in Word, not in some exotic web application. Tools that force lawyers to upload PDFs into an external portal always faltered, because the workflow disruption outweighed the promise of efficiency. Pincites avoids this trap entirely. It integrates directly into Word, living quietly in a sidebar. This design decision is more than convenience. It is the reason adoption is possible. When you open Word with Pincites installed, you see two tabs, one for playbooks and one for the Composer. Playbooks are your rule engines, the codified standards. Composer is your generative assistant, the one that drafts summaries, comments, or even new clauses on demand. This separation mirrors how lawyers think. The playbook is doctrine, the Composer is craft. Both exist side by side, ready to be summoned when needed. The workflow unfolds like this. You receive a contract, say a vendor services agreement. You open it in Word. Instead of scrolling through manually, you activate the Pincites sidebar and load your vendor playbook. One click runs the review. Behind the scenes, the text is segmented into clauses. Each clause is semantically tagged: indemnity, limitation of liability, confidentiality, governing law, termination, and so forth. The LLM parses meaning. The playbook rules are applied. Each rule outputs a status: pass, fail, or needs review. The results appear in a checklist in your sidebar. If you click into a failed check, the system highlights the exact passage in the contract. It shows you why the clause failed, what the standard is, and what the recommended fix is. You can choose to apply the red line, drop in the suggested comment, or ignore. If you apply, the change appears instantly in tracked changes, just as if you had typed it yourself. If you add the comment, it appears in Word's margin like any human comment. The counterparty will never know it was generated by AI. It looks exactly like your own work. This process feels natural because it mirrors what lawyers already do. The only difference is speed. What once required you to read 40 pages, cross-check against your memory or a binder, and draft edits now happens in seconds. The workflow does not feel alien. It feels like a turbocharged version of what you already know. That is why adoption sticks. Lawyers are not being asked to reinvent their craft. They are being given a partner that accelerates it. Now, let us dive deeper into what is happening invisibly under the hood. Consider the moment you click Run Playbook. The contract text is split into manageable segments. These segments are fed into the language model. The model produces embeddings, vector representations of meaning. Those vectors are compared against a library of known clause types. The system identifies, this passage is an indemnity. It tags it accordingly. The indemnity is then passed to the playbook rules governing indemnities. The rules check. Is it mutual? Does it cover third-party claims? Does it exclude gross negligence or willful misconduct? Each condition is evaluated. Failures are noted. For each failure, the playbook retrieves the resolution guidance and proposed clause. That information is assembled into a package and sent back to Word, where you see it as a red line and a comment. This orchestration requires multiple layers of coordination. The model provides the semantic fluency. The playbook provides the legal standards. The orchestration engine ensures the right clause is tested against the right rule, and the results are presented in a form that makes sense to lawyers. This is why Pincites feels trustworthy. It is not simply AI magic. It is AI channeled through a structured pipeline that lawyers can understand. To illustrate, let us walk through a single clause. Suppose the agreement contains this text. Vendor shall indemnify client against any and all losses, damages, and expenses, including attorney's fees, arising from vendor's performance under this agreement. Step 1. Segmentation. The model identifies this as a standalone clause. Step 2. Semantic tagging. It recognizes the function indemnification. Step 3. Playbook match. The vendor agreement playbook has an indemnity rule requiring mutual indemnification. Step 4. Condition check. The rule says indemnification must be mutual, covering both parties. The clause is one-sided, favoring only the client. Step 5. Result. The rule fails. Step 6. Resolution. The playbook contains resolution guidance. Make indemnification mutual, limited to third-party claims, excluding gross negligence. It also contains a suggested clause. Each party shall indemnify the other against third-party claims arising from negligence or misconduct, excluding gross negligence and willful misconduct. Step 7. Assembly. The system produces a track change inserting the mutual indemnity and a comment explaining, modified to make indemnification mutual and aligned with standard risk allocation. Step 8. Display. You see the failed check in your sidebar with the option to apply. If you click Apply, the red line and comment appear instantly in the Word doc. That is the loop, and it repeats across 50 checks, across 30 pages, across hundreds of contracts. Always the same orchestration. Segment, tag, match, check, resolve, assemble, display. The elegance of this pipeline is that it scales. It does not matter if the indemnity is worded in archaic terms, or if it is buried in the warranty section, or if it uses synonyms. Semantic tagging ensures it is found. The playbook ensures it is judged. The resolution ensures it is fixed. The lawyer ensures it is accepted. That final human step is crucial. Pincites never forces a change. It proposes, you dispose. That is the balance of trust. What makes this remarkable is not just speed, but reliability. Human lawyers miss things. We skim, we assume, we fatigue. The machine does not. It reads every word, every time, with the same discipline. It never forgets a rule. It never lets fatigue bias its judgment. It is consistent. That consistency is not glamorous, but it is priceless. In law, consistency is what keeps you out of trouble. In the next and final part of this lecture, we will explore how these mechanics feed into collaboration and institutional learning, and we will draw together the deeper implications of AI operating under the hood of contract review. We will close by reframing Pincites not as a tool, but as infrastructure, a system that redefines how legal departments and law firms operate at scale. When you zoom out from the individual contract, from the individual review, you begin to see that Pincites is not just a productivity tool. It is a collaboration platform disguised as a word add-in. Every redline, every comment, every decision encoded in a playbook is a piece of institutional knowledge captured and shared. Law firms and corporate legal departments have always struggled with knowledge management. Best practices lived in scattered memos, in one partner's hard drive, or simply in the habits of a few senior lawyers. Training new associates meant hours of shadowing, osmosis, and trial by fire. Pincites rewrites that equation. A new lawyer who has never touched your contracts can, on their very first day, run a playbook and produce red lines indistinguishable from those of a veteran. Why? Because the playbook is the veteran. It is their judgment captured in rules, preserved in guidance, and deployed by the AI at scale. The result is a flattening of the learning curve. Training cycles that used to take years now compress into weeks. This is not the elimination of mentorship, it is the multiplication of mentorship. Every contract becomes a lesson, every flagged clause a micro-seminar, every applied red line a reinforcement of doctrine. This collaborative layer also extends across geography. A general counsel in New York can encode standards in a playbook and know that they will be enforced identically in Tokyo, Sao Paulo, or Frankfurt. Lawyers around the world speak with one institutional voice. That consistency is a shield in negotiations and a boon in regulatory audits. It eliminates the drift that naturally occurs when dispersed teams operate in silos. And because the system logs patterns, you can see not only what your standards are, but how they are tested in practice. You can see which issues trigger the most failures, which deviations counterparties resist most fiercely, which positions hold firm, and which bend. That intelligence feeds back into playbook refinement, creating a virtuous cycle of institutional learning. Hidden leverage points. Now let us uncover the hidden leverage points, the asymmetries that most casual observers miss. The first is reputational leverage. When your contracts return to counterparties with clean, consistent, well-justified red lines, you project competence and authority. Even if they never know Pincites exists, they feel the weight of discipline. They stop probing for weaknesses. They concede faster. Over time, your organization becomes known as one that negotiates efficiently and firmly. That reputation is an asset. It accelerates deals before the first draft is even exchanged. The second leverage point is compliance signaling. Regulators and auditors do not just care about outcomes, they care about processes. If you can demonstrate that every contract has been run through a defined playbook with logs of checks, results, and resolutions, you present a story of control. That story can mean the difference between a slap on the wrist and a fine, between passing an audit and failing it. Traditional processes are opaque. Pincites makes them auditable. The hidden asymmetry is not only in reducing mistakes, but in proving with evidence that mistakes are systematically prevented. The third leverage point is cultural. In traditional hierarchies, juniors feel tentative, seniors feel overburdened, and cross-office collaboration is strained. By embedding standards in playbooks, you democratize competence. Juniors feel empowered because they produce work at a higher level. Seniors feel relieved because they no longer have to correct every trivial error. Cross-office teams feel unified because they apply the same language. This cultural shift has subtle but profound effects. It reduces turnover. It increases morale. It changes the way legal departments see themselves, not as bottlenecks, but as enablers. Closing reflections. Lecture 5 has taken us deep into the machinery of Pincites. We have explored the large language models that provide semantic fluency. We have dissected the playbooks that encode institutional standards. We have walked through clause tagging, continuous learning, and contextual analysis. We have mapped the integration with Word, the orchestration of rules, and the pipeline from segmentation to redline. And we have closed by examining collaboration, institutional learning, and hidden leverage points. The lesson is clear. Pincites is not a black box. It is an orchestrated system. The model reads, the playbook judges, the lawyer decides. This triangulation preserves human judgment while amplifying human capacity. It does not replace lawyers. It multiplies them. It embeds the wisdom of the few into the hands of the many. It converts fragile oral tradition into durable institutional code. It transforms the bottleneck of contract review into a lever of speed, consistency, and strategy. As you move forward in this masterclass, remember that features are not the end of the story. Understanding how the features work under the hood is what builds trust. Trust is what enables adoption, and adoption is what unlocks transformation. Pincites is not simply another tool in the lawyer's toolbox. It is infrastructure, an invisible system that, once in place, changes the way an entire institution operates. That is its power. That is its promise.